Welcome into episode 106 of The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. I'm Ken Ray, and I'm Ken Ray. That's not how that usually goes. We're doing something different today, something that I alluded to on macOS Ken, which is another show that I do. I assume most people listening to this know that, but if you found this show some other way, maybe on iTunes, maybe through an email from SecureMac, search iTunes for macOS Ken. It'd be fun to have you join me there. Now, for people who do listen to macOS Ken, I had said earlier this week that we'd be talking about the Trend Micro and Adware Doctor stories, the apps in the Mac App Store that seem to be up to no good. Turns out they were up to some good, though in a potentially shady way. I knew just enough to need to know more, and for that, I turned to SecureMac's Nicholas Ptacek. So earlier this week came troubling stories of malicious apps found in the Mac App Store. Apple Insider ran a piece last Friday, actually, saying a number of apps in the Mac App Store have been found to be stealing data from its users, acquiring sensitive information, and sending it to the developer, including one app which was the top paid utility available in the App Store before its removal. That app was called Adware Doctor. Apple Insider says the app claimed to remove adware threats from a Mac, including extensions and cookies in browsers. However, security researcher Patrick Wardle warned people that the cleaning process, and I put that in quotes in case you couldn't hear them, the cleaning process included collecting the browsing history of the user, as well as a list of all the running processes and a list of software downloaded to that Mac. In some cases, according to a piece from Malwarebytes, the info was being exfiltrated all the way to China, a country that Apple Insider points out doesn't require the same stringent storage requirements as the US or European countries for personal data. So a lot of people may have heard about the Trend Micro thing that was happening. I want to be clear. First of all, it was Adware Doctor was the one sending info to a server in China, as far as we know. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And that was not the Trend Micro or one of the Trend Micro apps. Is that correct?
That is also correct.
Okay. Do we have any idea who was behind Adware Doctor and what was being done with the exfiltrated information?
It was a developer in the App Store. I'm not sure of the name off the top of my head, but it was not any sort of major company or anything like that. They had trouble in the past where they were utilizing a name that had previously been used by a legitimate anti-adware tool for Mac. And so when they got called out on that, they switched their name. And so, kind of shady stuff from the start. That was a couple of years ago, actually. But they were like, I think the number one utility in the Mac App Store.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it wasn't one of the it wasn't one of the big companies or anything like that. It was just kind of, a smaller unknown developer who happened to be popular and doing some shady stuff.
You see, and this is the weird thing, and we'll talk about this more in a moment, but I mean, so like a big name, a name you trust, you might feel better about, but the whole idea behind the Mac App Store was you can feel good about anything that's there. And so that, raises a couple of questions, but we'll get to those questions in a moment. Because as weird / scary, or aberrant, let's say, as the Adware Doctor thing is or was, it gets bigger and badder when it is a name that you may trust, like Trend Micro, because they've been found to be doing, the same or similar things. According to SC Magazine UK, at least 2 offending Trend Micro apps have been pulled from the Mac App Store, though Trend Micro says it didn't do anything wrong. I mean, okay, they say their own investigation did confirm that the apps Dr. Cleaner, Dr. Cleaner Pro, Dr. Antivirus, Dr. Unarchiver, Dr. Battery, and Duplicate Finder collected and uploaded a small snapshot of the browser history on a one-time basis, covering the 24 hours prior to installation. But they say it was a one-time data collection done for security purposes to analyze whether a user had recently encountered adware or other threats and thus to improve the product and service. Plus, they say the scan and send was in the end-user license agreement, which they're apparently under the impression that everybody reads thoroughly. Now, the good news, Apple has removed the offending apps. The bad news, these offending apps got into the Mac App Store, so how are we supposed to know / believe that Apple got them all? I mean, it's especially troubling when you think, okay, so Trend Micro is doing this, and this other weird I don't want to say nameless developer, because obviously Apple knew who they were enough to boot them once before, but then they changed the name of the thing that they were presenting. I want to get to the question of Apple's reputation. I want to get to the question of Trend Micro's reputation, but I feel like I should give them a chance to, I don't even know if you can say defend themselves, but respond. Trend Micro has, over the past few days, been posting updates to their blog. On the 10th of September, they actually did apologize. Here's what they wrote. We apologize to our community for concern they might have felt and can reassure all that their data is safe and at no point was compromised. We've taken action and have 3 updates to share with all of you. First, we have completed the removal of browser collection features across our consumer products in question. Second, we have permanently dumped all the legacy logs which were stored on US-based AWS servers. This includes the one-time 24-hour log of browser history held for 3 months and permitted by users upon install. And third, we believe we identified a core issue, which is humbly the result of the use of common code libraries. We have learned that browser collection functionality was designed in common across a few of our applications and then deployed the same way for both security-oriented as well as non-security-oriented apps, such as the ones in discussion. This has been corrected. So it sounds like Trend Micro is saying, hey, we used some common code without realizing what it was up to. Is that what you hear them saying?
Yeah, it sounds like they're saying we don't know our code base very well. And in truth, reusing common code, shared libraries, is something that most developers do. I mean, like 99% of developers will reuse code because it saves you time. In this case, it sounds like code was written for a specific purpose. The reasoning is legitimate, but the execution is lacking in terms of letting users know what's going on, providing reasoning behind it. And not to say that it was a shared library situation with Adware Doctor, the other program in question, but the reasoning behind collecting the browser history and download history in the first place, it's actually legitimate in terms of why these companies wanted that information, to check and see, is there customers downloaded my app because they want to get rid of adware? Is there a file download recently that looks like it could have been adware? Let's go download using that address and see if it's adware, and then we can add a definition for it to detect it. That is a legitimate thing to do. However, you'd want to be approaching it with the whole, hey, user, we're going to do this, and this is why, and this is what will help keep you safe and help keep other users safe. So can we do this? Rather than burying it in an end user license agreement or not even saying anything at all like Adware Doctor did and just taking the data.
See, this is one of the things that's been confusing about this story this week, and one of the reasons I wanted to get you on. When I hear what Adware Doctor was doing, and then when I hear Trend Micro say, yeah, this is common code stuff, we didn't even know it was happening. I mean, it does sound like, it sounds plausible at the very least that they could have both been using the same code. It's just Trend Micro is saying, yeah, we didn't know this was happening or we didn't realize this was happening, whereas Adware Doctor, it seems, did know it was happening and then was sending the information off for reasons that we apparently don't have a clear handle on. I
don't think that they were using the same shared code between Adware Doctor and the Trend Micro apps. I think there's just similar end result, similar functionality. But yeah, again, I think it's down to execution. The reason that Trend Micro is going to be able to get their apps back in the App Store is, they technically did have the information in the end user license agreement, even if nobody read it. They're going to take a hit to their brand name there, but I'm not so certain that the other developer will be let back into the Mac App Store, at least under that name or developer certificate. They'll apply for a new account or whatever needs to be done. Because being number one in utilities had to be making some serious money every month.
The other thing, I don't mean to sound completely suspicious, but there's one thing about the Trend Micro thing that confuses me. I mean, they're saying we didn't know this was happening. It was a thing that was happening with this common code, but they're also saying it was in our end user license agreement. And so it's all cool. I mean, which one is it?
Let me preface it by saying I'm not a lawyer.
Right.
Most likely the end user license agreement, which I have not taken a look at Trend Micros, but if it is boilerplate, like most of them are, it will have a very generic section in terms of user data that they collect, and they will collect it. And the stated reasons are usually we're collecting it to enhance our product, to do research for other products, to provide enhancements and improvements to this program. And they'll then have like a whole boatload of data that they're allowed to collect under this. And some of that is the result of stuff like GDPR and other privacy laws that have gone into effect, in that it's a requirement to have some sort of language in your end user license agreement. In this case, that was probably kind of a CYA that was already in their end user license agreement, and it just happens to be like, hey, this fits. We'll just, it was in the license agreement. You agreed to this. It does sound like they just were including, shared libraries and didn't really think about that fact. I don't know. SecureMac isn't a huge company, so I know all of my coworkers. At something that's a larger company, that's not always the case. So you might not, the right hand might not know what the left hand's doing. Mm-hmm. It's only defense I can kind of give there, but it's again the whole situation rubs me really wrong in terms of you did not ask the users up front for their consent in this, and that's so important for not only somebody to trust your brand, but it's just the right thing to do. And that it kind of sucks, because then it gives all the other security utilities, ours included, a bad name, because your end users are just going to say, oh, all those apps are just stealing my data and sending it off to servers overseas, and they don't take the time to differentiate between companies that are doing things right and companies that are not.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird. Well, I was going to wait until later, but I mean, we can sort of do it now. I got a figure for Apple and for Trend Micro. With the general consumer, this isn't going to mean anything. But I also don't think the general consumer is really that interested in security software for the Mac, or, ad tracking software or anti-ad tracking software for the Mac, or things like that. You enter this weird gray area where there are some people who are waking up to the idea that just having a Mac is not enough. I need to have something. But then once they start reading, well, Adware Doctor was stealing people's information and Trend Micro was stealing people's information. This is all just a scam to steal people's information. I mean, it's not, and obviously it's not that, but now we are in this weird place where you've got two relatively big stories if you're keeping up with security. And like I say, it's sort of that middle ground now where people might end up leaving themselves more vulnerable because they're concerned, about the bad press.
Yeah. And there's no real easy solution to the situation. As a security company, Trend Micro or this other developer or ourselves, getting samples of new malware, adware, whatever, to be able to analyze it and update our programs to detect it so users are protected is really important. And kind of goes back to this whole thing, like, these are the companies that were doing it. I believe that in both cases it was legitimate. The Adware Doctor program, from the analysis done by Ptacek Wardle, it was legitimately looking for real pieces of adware, and it was doing that stuff correctly. So, the cases I would be worried about would be where you don't expect the app to be doing this, like where you have an app in the App Store, is popular, and it has nothing to do with your web browser, and it's collecting that stuff in the background. And I don't know that anybody has been checking for that on the Mac side of things as much. I know on iOS there are a number of companies that are kind of keeping an eye on the various apps and checking for data that's being sent out by them, and that's how a lot of these apps have gotten flagged for sending location data when they're not supposed to be sending it to ad companies. That there's a lot of focus on that in iOS, and not so much Mac App Store side of things. So I'd be more concerned about the apps you don't hear about, the ones you don't know about. Well, except then you have to be concerned about everything. Yeah, and that's that's kind of my point. There is Apple's review process. Generally speaking, they're making sure you're not doing anything you're not supposed to be doing with system calls. They don't want you making, doing certain stuff. And there are ways around that, as we saw with Adware Doctor, when it was kind of escaping the sandbox and grabbing some data that normally it wouldn't have access to. But Apple's really more concerned about making sure the app isn't going to crash on the user the first time. They don't want users who just bought a $15, $20 app and have it not even launch, because then the users will leave bad reviews. And Apple's less concerned as far as the security stuff goes. And I think there's a lot of room for improvement there. Not only in their initial analysis of an app during the app review process, but a way for security researchers to communicate with Apple when they find these things. This was another case where the initial researcher on Twitter had posted some information about this, I think going back a month or two, and had notified Apple and had used the general contact email address that Apple provides for there's a problem with this app in the App Store. And it's a catch-all email address. So you have however many users sending however many reports, legit, bogus, hey, I don't like this app, I want my money back, whatever they're sending. Obviously, the triage on Apple's side of things for going through all those emails isn't the right fit for something like this with a security thing. They need to have a way for security researchers to get a hold of somebody who knows, who has the clout at Apple and who can take action on a much faster, a quicker basis, because this one, it took hitting the news in a major way for Apple to take action on. And that's been a bit of a trend with the App Store. As far as bad press, Apple will take action. If it's just somebody trying to reach out to them, either the right people aren't getting the message or it's lower on the priority list. But I think that has to change.
Let me ask you a question really quickly about going back and downloading the browser history for the past 24 hours. Is the assumption there that somebody is buying an adware tracker or an adware blocker because suddenly they're facing adware issues? Yes, absolutely. And I actually don't think 24 hours is enough time. I think you're going to want to get as much of the download history as is available on the computer. If you were doing, if you're letting the user know, that's usually the result. And we notice that with our own products is you have a user who has encountered a problem. Mm-hmm. They go out looking for a solution. And then if the solution they find doesn't solve their problem, they get really mad. And the adware side of things and the malware side of things, the people who are creating that stuff the pace has been picking up for years for the Mac, and it's gotten to the point where it's hard to keep up with it sometimes. Mm-hmm. And there are new, minor variations and minor strains of adware and malware out there. And your security, the engine in your security product might not be able to detect that brand new variant. You might not even know about it until you get a user reporting it. And from a support point of view and a development point of view, trying to ask a user to find that file they downloaded that might have been the problem, it's an exercise in futility, and it just kind of stresses everybody out on both ends. And if you can have an automated tool that will gather the information you need and get it back to you as a company, that's the way to do it. But you gotta let the user know. Well, what it's reminding me of is it's sort of like what's the phrase? A little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. Yes. So you have actually calmed a lot of my concerns in talking today, because you're saying there are actually legitimate reasons to do this. But the thing for Trend Micro or whomever to do would have been to say, here's what we're going to do. But then if you start off with, look, we're going to download your browser history. No. You're not going to download my browser history. I'm never going to click OK to that. So you're not going to say it in a simple way that I'm going to understand. But now the problem is when I find out that you're downloading my browser history, and that at least one firm of the however many they found that are doing this in the App Store, which it turns out was in the end user license agreement anyway, that they're sending that to China. I mean, so now here are the things that I know. China's bad. China's not good on consumer privacy. This thing is taking information that I guess it says in somewhere in that 28-page end user license agreement I could have found, but everybody knows we don't read those. I mean, now I know just enough to be freaked out and to maybe not implement this stuff. So, just a point of correction real quick. I believe Trend Micro was not sending stuff to China. It was the other app that didn't have an end user license agreement. Oh, it didn't. I didn't realize it didn't have an end user license agreement. No, I knew it wasn't Trend Micro that was doing that. That was one of the very first things that they said, and they sort of have the bad fortune of having hit around the same time that the Adware Doctor story hit. And it actually the research happened after the Adware Doctor. It was the same guy
started looking at other apps to see what they were doing, and then noticed the trend. I guess from what I heard, Apple's actually going to be requiring all new. I think they've been requiring it for some time, where they're requiring apps to submit a privacy policy, whereas it wasn't required initially. You could just have there's a boilerplate one that Apple provided. So for a while now, I guess all new apps that are submitted are required to have that. And now, from what I've heard, is even if you're updating an old app that's been around for a while, Apple is now, as of I believe early October, they're going to be requiring that developers include a privacy policy with the app. So, and that's more CYA stuff, but...
Well, there's another thing I like about their new requirements, though, because you're only going to be able to update the privacy policy if you're also updating the application.
Yes.
So
which is a very good thing.
Right. You can't just, you can't make me click a privacy policy. Yes, I agree. And of course, you can't make me anyway. But you can't have it where I agreed to a privacy policy a year ago and you decide, I could actually make some money if I sold this information. I'm just going to change the privacy policy. You're not going to be able to do that. It sounds like anyway. You're going to have to live by, what you had said until you offer real functionality. Or I guess you could just change the color and then bury it in the end user license agreement. And that's the part that I want to get to. We've joked for years that no one reads the end user license agreement. And it's funny because it's true. What needs to happen to make people read them? I mean, does there need to be some sort of simplification process? Can you do with like a flash, not a flash video, but can you do with like an HTML5 video that says, here's the stuff that we're doing. And yes, there's all this legalese, but boiling it down, here are the important parts that you need to know.
And that's the problem, is that would make things a lot easier, but the lawyers are never going to allow that because of the fact that those end user license agreements form they're essentially the contract between the user and the developer, with the user usually saying, hey, I promise I'm not going to sue you if anything goes wrong, and I promise I'm not going to get mad if my data gets leaked on the internet. And it's a bunch of stuff to protect the companies. Making it accessible to users, there's probably legal ramifications there as far as, well, that says that in plain English, but really means this in legalese. I think I would love it if it could be like that. I've seen some companies that do have here's a synopsis of our privacy policy or our end user license agreement, but here's the legal mumbo jumbo. I think the thing that any company could do to kind of alleviate and avoid some of these headaches is be upfront with the user. Not, don't bury this stuff in the end user license agreement that nobody's going to read. You still have to have it there anyway for legal reasons, but be upfront with the user. If you need this data, as I was just saying to you on the show, Ken, I was explaining to you why a company might want that data, and you said, "Oh, well, that puts my mind at ease." Why didn't these companies say, "Hey, we need this data for reasons X, Y, and Z"? Not all your users are going to agree to it, and that's the truth of the matter. Is you're going to have probably a small percentage who are going to be okay with it, and in that case, maybe dial back the information that you're looking to get. There's got to be some better way of convincing the users that there's a good reason to hand over that data. But being sneaky about it, at best, you're going to have protected yourself with your end user license agreement, and you'll look bad in the press for a while, like Trend Micro is here. At worst, you could get kicked out of the App Store and potentially banned forever from it, like it looks like might have happened with this other developer. And either way, your users aren't going to trust you, and it's going to show up in the news when people look for your company on Google. And it's the way to alleviate that headache is to not be shady in the first place.
Thanks for calling Apple Manhattan Village. Apple is aware that some customers are receiving unsolicited calls claiming to be from this Apple store. If you receive an unsolicited call, you should not provide any information to the callers. For more information on cybercrime and ways to protect your computer, visit www.fbi.gov/investigate/cyber. Also, if you feel you have been a victim of fraud, please contact your local police. If you would like help changing your Apple ID password, please visit support.apple.com. Your call may be recorded for quality assurance. I'm an automated system that can handle complete sentences. How can I help you today?
Yeah, hey, Ken, long time, first time. Can you get Tim Cook on one of my podcasts, please? Apparently it can't handle that complete sentence. So after Nicholas and I recorded, this show's regular co-host, August Trometer, told Nicholas Raba, Nicholas Ptacek, and me to call the Southern California Apple Store and listen to the recording that you just heard. Now, we weren't quite sure what to make of it. One of the guys guessed that Apple might be putting that recording as part of the answering message for all of its stores. August tried another store in Southern California and did get the same recording, though I tried 2 stores in other parts of the country, one in Franklin, Tennessee, and one in Boston, Massachusetts, and did not get a similar message. But then one of the Nikolai looked on Twitter and found out that this has actually been happening for a while, and it's been happening a lot. People from different parts of the country have been reporting for over a year that they're getting calls from scammers using spoofed numbers of real Apple stores to try to get access to iCloud accounts. Now, here's how these things generally work, according to Nicholas Ptacek. Scammers will simply cold call a potential victim, usually saying that they're from Microsoft or whatever, and that they were alerted that there were viruses on the computer of the person they're calling, and so they're calling to help. Then they talk the victim through installing remote access software, PC Anywhere or something like that. They run a few terminal commands that output gibberish to make it look scary, then tell the victim they need to pay $250 or so to fix the alleged problem. Of course, there's no actual problem except they're on the phone with the scammer. Other times, they'll take out ads on Google with a phone number prominently listed, making it look like they're tech support for Apple or Google or Amazon or Microsoft. Then the victims come to them. Someone searches on Google for Amazon tech support or something similar. They see the scammer's phone number at the top of the search results, then they call and give sensitive information to some scam artist. What the Nikolai don't know is whether these situations with the spoofed Apple numbers, it seems more advanced. Like it could actually be spear phishing people that they know have iCloud accounts for their iCloud credentials. Then again, it's possible that iCloud has gotten big enough that these scammers are just figuring, throw enough rocks, they'll hit enough people with iCloud accounts and they can start chipping away at those. The biggest thing to remember is exactly what the recording said. Apple's not going to call you out of the blue and ask for login information. Nobody should be doing that. Please be safe. You know, we've done shows talking people through, helping other people avoid falling prey to scams, like the ones apparently trying to take advantage in Southern California. You may, if you've listened to this show before, know where to find those notes. It's SecureMac.com/checklist. Not only will you find notes there, you can find and listen to the shows associated with the various topics. Highly encourage you to check it out. SecureMac.com/checklist. If you have a question you'd like to ask or a topic you'd like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. That address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. And we'll talk to you next week.